My missing husband came home, but I just know it isn't him. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepypasta. Let's get into today's scary story. My husband went missing 6 months ago. Just went out to work one day and never came home. It was a horrible shock to the whole neighborhood because things like that just don't happen in our little slice of white picket fence suburbia. The police launched an investigation and the neighborhood watch sent out search party, but no one ever found any evidence to indicate what had happened to him. Our families were devastated. Recently, the missing posters have been taken down or papered over. The updates from the police became less frequent and dwindled away. I accepted that, hard as it was to admit, my Rick wasn't coming back. Until he did. A week ago, I was in the back garden watering my petunias when I heard the garden gate creak open. I jerked my head in that direction and there he was. Exactly the same as he was the day he disappeared. Same wind-swept blonde hair and bright blue eyes, same curl to his pink lips. I was in shock. Our families had mourned him, and yet there he was, standing in our garden like he had just popped out for milk or something. When I asked where he had been, he said he didn't know. He couldn't remember anything about the last 6 months. All our family and friends are beside themselves with joy. They almost can't believe it. But that's just the thing. I don't believe it. Look, I understand how crazy this all sounds, I do. Our families would never believe me and I can't go to the police unless I want to end up in a straitjacket. But I just know that the man sleeping next to me isn't my husband. I don't know what to do. I know I should be happy, but I'm not. I'm terrified. I don't know much about anything supernatural or paranormal. I don't even like watching horror movies. But something about this whole situation makes my skin crawl. Just let me explain why I'm so sure. Once I've done that, hopefully one of you will believe me and you'll be able to tell me what to do. The morning after Rick came home, I made him a cup of tea. When I handed it to him, he gave me the brightest smile. Then he took a sugar cube from the dish on the table and dropped it into the cup. Our house was in chaos with his return and I was still in shock, so I didn't think much of it at the time. But it's been replaying in my mind ever since. I know it doesn't sound very significant, but my husband never put sugar in his tea. He was always adamant that it ruined the taste, and he'd get so frustrated if I ever put sugar in his cup by accident, and yet this man had sugar. Then it was the golf. A few days ago, when he was out visiting his mom, I recorded a golf tournament that was showing on the TV. It was one of Rick's favorite golfers that was competing, and he never missed it. Once he even skipped out on an anniversary dinner just to watch a championship. Only when he came home from his parents and I told him what I'd done, he just seemed unbothered. Like he said thanks and everything, and then he asked me if I wanted to go to dinner. He didn't even watch it. And that's just so out of character for him. Then one night I woke up around 2 a.m. to see Rick's face inches from mine just looking at me with these blank eyes. I kind of gave this nervous laugh and asked, "Baby, what are you doing?" And he didn't answer. For like a solid 30 seconds. He just stared, almost like he was looking right through me. Then he suddenly smiled and said, "Sorry, honey, sometimes I just can't believe this is real." And he just rolled over and went to sleep. I didn't get much sleep after that myself. Yesterday, about a week after he came home, the neighborhood threw a street party to celebrate his return. Everyone from our street and the streets on either side turned up to see him and tell him how happy they were that he's alright. When he wasn't standing with his arm around my waist, he was milling around and chatting amicably to each and every one of our neighbors, even the little kid. Jackson, our next door neighbor, Sally's toddler, wanted to play peekaboo, and Rick happily played along with a smile on his face. Now, my husband never did that. Rick always said he didn't like kids. That's why we never had any. And so he never wanted to play with any of the neighborhood children, especially not Jackson. Rick all but avoided him. Before he disappeared, I had started to suspect it was so I wouldn't see them together and notice the subtle but unmistakable similarities. The final nail in the coffin, proverbially speaking, was Sally. Just this morning, she came knocking on our door. Her excuse was the tray of brownies she carried, but I think she just wanted to push her way into our morning so she could see for herself what the situation was. After she left, I called her a nosy busybody. Rick laughed, kissed my head, and agreed with me. That was when I knew for sure that I couldn't really be him. Rick always used to get so mad whenever I insulted Sally, like I didn't have any right to hate her even though she'd been screwing my husband for years. But today there was none of that. He didn't even try to defend her. I know what you must be thinking. If he was in an accident or something, he might have just had some kind of traumatic brain injury that caused him to forget some things about his life. Maybe even change his personality. And that's a valid, reasonable explanation. I have no doubt it's what the police would tell me if I reported all this. But you know why I'm dead certain that man isn't my husband? He doesn't have a scar. If he was really Rick, he'd have a scar on the side of his forehead shaped like a golf club I hit him with. But there's nothing. Not a mark. Honestly, I'm this close to going out tonight and digging up my petunias just to make sure he's still under there. I don't know what I'm sharing a bed with, but I know it's not my husband. So what the hell am I going to do? I went to a wedding where the groom would not stop smiling. I went to my cousin Ava's wedding a few days ago. I'm still processing what's happened. I'll try to get everything out as best I can. Ava has been dating some guy named Ethan for the past year. Being in their 30s, they sort of fast-tracked the whole marriage thing. I'd never met the guy and I hadn't spoken to Ava in a few years, but what the hell, it was guaranteed to be a fun time. The groom walked down the aisle first, a tall, pale man in a dark suit. He stood at the front of the church and smiled. He smiled when Ava walked down the aisle. He smiled as they kissed after being pronounced husband and wife. He smiled as they walked out of the church. It didn't strike me as weird until we got to the reception. When they entered, he was still grinning that wide grin with his perfectly white, straight teeth. But up close, it looked, I don't know, wrong somehow? He wasn't really engaging with guests, he wasn't talking or laughing, he was just sort of scanning the place, staring and grinning wide without it really reaching his eyes. I guess he's smiling for the camera, I told myself. Or maybe he's a little socially awkward, and he figures nothing will go wrong if he just keeps smiling. It got really weird, however, when they served dinner. I watched him sitting at the sweetheart table with Ava, shoveling chicken piccata into his mouth as he still grinned, barely opening his mouth wide enough to get the bite, immediately closing it, making loud chewing noises as he chewed while grinning. Have you ever seen someone chew their food while grinning? It is completely unnatural looking. Smiling with your mouth closed, sure, but showing all your teeth grinning as you chew? It was so weird. They eventually came to our table to say hi. I couldn't tear my eyes away from his face. He was still grinning. His wide blue eyes were jittering from person to person at the table. His face looked like a mask. There was no warmth. It was like looking at a statue. I whispered this to my sister once they left. There's something seriously wrong with him. Why is he smiling like that? My sister thought I was being a catty old maid. Well, old mister. Shut up. He looks fine. No, he doesn't. He looks like he's madly in love, she snapped back. Stop being jealous. Jeez, Matt. That hurt. It honestly did. None of the other guests seemed to think anything was wrong. They thought it was all fine. Him grinning through the first dance, through the speeches, through the champagne toast. He tilted the champagne flute into his grinning mouth without spilling a drop somehow. This is so weird. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but that was my first mistake, not realizing he had disappeared from the dance floor. As I was washing my hands, a stall door swung open behind me. In the mirror over my shoulder, I saw Ethan standing there. His skin looked milky white in the bright lights. His blue, bulgy frog eyes staring at me. He was smiling. I don't mean that he saw me and then smiled. No, when he opened the stall door, he was already smiling. He walked over and began washing his hands at the sink right next to me, even though there were 3 other sinks. Our shoulders bumped. Great wedding, I mumbled, trying to be friendly. He turned to look down at me, slowly. His blue eyes bored into mine. My heart began to pound. Music's great too, I said nervously to fill the silence. He just stared at me. That's when I realized. He hadn't said a single word the entire wedding. There were no vows. He just nodded when the officiant asked if he took Ava as his wife. He didn't thank the best man after the speech, and I hadn't even seen him talking to Ava at the sweetheart table. Just smiling and staring. I backed away. His eyes tracked me as I went. Just as I reached the bathroom door, he stretched up to his full height and stared down at me. He looked even taller than he had in the reception hall, somehow, under the fluorescent lights. Then he stopped smiling. As his face relaxed, his cheeks sagged. His forehead drooped. The skin of his face began to shift and slide. I froze as his face began to pull and separate from his skull. He grinned, and everything stretched back into place. I finally leapt into action and darted out the bathroom door. I went back to my sister and grabbed her arm. "We have to get out of here," I breathed. "Ethan, he's—" "Will you shut up already?" she said, barely even looking at me. And then Ethan sauntered in, long legs taking him smoothly across the dance floor. He slowed as he passed our table, on his way back to Ava. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder. It's been 3 days. The skin of my shoulder is pulsing with pain, like it's infected somehow, and I can't help but notice, every time I look in the mirror, my face looks a little saggier, a little looser, like it isn't quite attached the same way anymore. So I've started smiling more, just to hold everything in place. Every Halloween, my mommy carves special jack-o'-lanterns. She won't let me show anyone. "Mommy, where do you get your jack-o'-lanterns?" I asked, gazing expectantly up at her. She stared for a long time at the 3 lumpy orange messes lined neatly in front of her before she turned to me and stooped to my level. Her icy gaze sent a chill ripping down my spine as her eyes connected with mine. "It's a secret. I'll tell you when you're older, but you can't talk about them with the other kids, okay?" I sheepishly broke eye contact, puffing out my lower lip as I stared defiantly at the ground. "But Mommy, yours are so much better than everyone else's. None of my friends' jack-o'-lanterns have hair or teeth or blood like yours do. I want to show them," I whined, tears threatening to spill down my rosy cheeks. "I know you do, sweetie, but Mommy will get in big trouble if you tell anyone about these. You don't want Mommy to get in trouble, do you?" "No," I sniffled as she gently wiped my face. "That's a good girl. I'll tell you what, when you're old enough, we can carve the jack-o'-lanterns together. But only if you promise not to tell anyone." She fixed her gaze on me, awaiting a response. I turned to the jack-o'-lantern closest to me. It looked so real. Tangled, blood-splattered blonde hair sprouted from the top of the pumpkin. Its mouth was twisted downward in a permanent scream, perfect white teeth visible within. And those eyes. I could just feel the fear radiating from those pale blue irises. I slowly turned back to Mommy. A smile blossomed across my lips, and I nodded my head fervently. "I promise, I can't wait," I cried, hopping up and down excitedly. "One day, my jack-o'-lanterns will be even more terrified than yours." My husband cheated on me. Ever since I found out, he's been acting different. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepypasta. Let's get into today's scary story. Justin and I had been together for 10 years, married for 6. I'd been with him for my whole adult life. We'd been dating since I was 17 and he was 18. I always thought he was my soulmate, the man I wanted to grow old with. Turns out, I was wrong. I was devastated when I found out. Yes, Justin had been staying out later than usual, and his explanations were usually flimsy at best. I'm not stupid. I had my suspicions, but I think I just really didn't want to come to terms with the fact that my husband was seeing another woman. Honestly, I might have gone years without discovering the truth, but Justin got sloppy. "Welcome home, honey. Fun night out with the guys after work?" "Uh-huh," Justin grumbled, brushing past me. "I made dinner if you're hungry. Beef tips and rice. I know it's one of your favorites." "Ate at the bar. I'm going to bed," he muttered, steadying himself against the wall before woozily clomping up the stairs. My heart sank. Nights like those were becoming more and more frequent. I loved my husband. All I wanted was to spend a little quality time with him after a long day at work. But he couldn't even spare me a few minutes. I glanced up at him as he lumbered up the steps, a tear trickling down my cheek. In an instant, any sadness that I felt was replaced with burning rage, because when Justin passed underneath the overhead light, I saw what appeared to be a hickey on the side of his neck. A cocktail of emotions swirled within me, despair, resentment, betrayal. They all hit me like a ton of bricks. I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I mean, who would? The man I had been head over heels for all that time had stabbed me in the back. I was in disbelief. I stumbled to the kitchen, pulling out a chair before I could collapse. I stared into space, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. I sat there for a long time, deep in thought. After a while, I felt numb. Like my entire personality had been flushed down the drain, leaving nothing but an empty husk. Then, a thought flashed across my mind. I'd been mistaken. That had to be it. Just a mere trick of the light. It was a pretty dimly lit hallway, after all. Whatever the case, I had to know. I tiptoed upstairs, abandoning my dinner. I crept up to our room as quiet as a church mouse before lightly pushing open the bedroom door. Justin was fast asleep. I didn't waste any time. I rushed across the room, careful to avoid any squeaky floorboards, and I inspected Justin's neck. His snores grew louder as I approached. He always was a heavy sleeper. I cursed when I got a closer look. Justin was sleeping on his side, and I was not going to try and roll him over. I glanced over, searching for anything that might provide concrete evidence. My eyes fell to the bedside table. Bingo. I snatched Justin's phone from his charger. I held my breath as I pressed his meaty thumb onto the screen to unlock it. I grinned, feeling a rush of exhilaration as I achieved my goal. What? I froze. Justin groggily opened his eyes a sliver as my hand hovered over him. My body turned to ice, and I prayed with all my might that my husband would just go back to sleep. To my immense shock, my prayers were answered. Justin mumbled incoherently under his breath before grabbing a fistful of covers and nodding off. It escaped by the skin of my teeth. I had to be more careful. The first thing I did was check Justin's texts. I immediately saw a woman's name I didn't recognize. My heart shattered when I read the messages. "Hey baby, last night was incredible. See you again after work today? You're damn right. I wish you never had to leave. What about that wife of yours, though? Won't she get suspicious? Her? Not a chance. Even if she does find out, she won't leave. I could murder a baby in front of her and she'd still think I was a saint. A deep-seated rage bubbled within me. Did Justin really think that little of me? He clearly saw me as nothing more than a spineless codependent pushover. Well, I'd show him. I screenshotted the evidence, scrolling through dozens of nude photos that I hadn't taken, and sent everything to my number. I deleted any proof of my snooping, then replaced Justin's phone on the charger. I stormed out of the room, grabbing my keys as I went. I made it halfway across the living room when the realization hit me. I had nowhere to go. All my family lived 7 hours away. It was too late to book a decent hotel, and I really didn't want to drag any of my friends into my drama. Not yet, at least. That left me with one option. I had to sleep on the couch. I plopped down onto the sofa and sighed. I didn't want to have to confront it, but I knew what I had to do. In the morning, I was going to find a lawyer and start the divorce process. The thought alone was enough to break me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I cried like a baby, silently sobbing into a scratchy pillow for what must have been hours. My eyes were puffy by the time I was done. I couldn't fathom falling asleep in a state like that, but I must have at some point, because the next thing I remember, sunlight was flooding through the blinds. Morning, babe. How'd you... The rest of the sentence caught in my throat. That was right. Justin and I were about to be over. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, tears stinging at the corner of my vision. I opened up the text I'd sent myself as proof that the past 12 hours hadn't been some twisted nightmare, but the messages were gone. My eyes grew wide as I stared at the screen. That couldn't be right. They'd been there, clear as day the night before. Something wasn't adding up. I suddenly paused, bolting upright. Was that breakfast? The tantalizing aroma of eggs and bacon wafted around the corner from the kitchen. My brows furrowed. Justin never cooked. My breathing was shallow as I tentatively shuffled toward the kitchen. Curiosity gnawed at me like a piranha. I apprehensively peeked around the corner, unsure of what I would find. To my shock, there was my husband humming a little tune while flipping pancakes. I rubbed my eyes. Was I seeing things? Surely I was delusional from lack of sleep. That had to be it. Then, Justin turned his icy blue eyes locking onto mine. Morning, princess. I hope you're hungry. I saw you sleeping on the couch and I thought you might not be feeling well, so I decided to make you a hot meal to help you feel better. My heart skipped a beat. Was this really my husband? It looked like him, sounded like him too. Still, I was weary. Yeah, just feeling a little under the weather is all. Are you feeling okay? You're acting different. Never been better. Honestly, I think I've really turned a new leaf, he said, placing a steaming plate before me. The old Justin is kaput. From now on, I swear, I'm going to be the best husband I can be. Our gazes connected, and I searched his expression for answers. He seemed genuine. If this was an act, it was a damn good one. Thanks, babe. That makes me really happy to hear. Justin beamed at me, the warmth of his smile seeping into my heart. It had been years since he looked at me like that. Well, get used to it, because I'm keeping my word. I love you, Lydia. I wanted to be suspicious. I wanted to remain silent. I wanted to keep my guard up. But how could I? All I needed was love and attention, and I was finally getting it. For the first time in a long time, it felt like my husband actually cared. I love you too, Justin, I muttered, before digging into my meal. A big part of me was still leery of my husband. His timing was pretty convenient after all, but even with all my doubts, Justin was seemingly sticking to his promise. He took me out on dates, paid to get my nails done, bought me flowers. He even started shouldering most of the housework. Needless to say, I was impressed. If he would have kept that up, I might have never suspected a thing. But one night, he slipped up. We were cuddled up on the couch watching The Truman Show when I asked. Now, I wish I would have kept my mouth shut. Hey, babe. Yes, my love, Justin asked, his eyes still glued to the screen. If someone close to you was an imposter, like a perfect replica except for a few tiny changes, do you think you'd notice? Justin tensed up, his eyes wide as he slowly turned to face me. A blank stare had overtaken his expression. A chill rippled through my body when he looked at me like that. He was beginning to frighten me. I suppose so. Why do you ask? His voice was monotone, dripping with a tinge of urgency. I didn't know how to process his sudden shift in personality. It's the premise of the movie we're watching. I watched as the color seeped back into his face, and he loosened up, breathing a sigh of relief. I cocked a curious brow. Why was he acting so strange? That makes sense. We sat there in uncomfortable silence, shifting our attention back to the TV screen. After a few more tense moments, I couldn't take it anymore. I've got to use the restroom and charge my phone. I'll be right back. No need to pause the movie for me. Justin nodded before grinning up at me. His smile. Had his teeth always been that straight? Okay, baby girl, hurry back. Wouldn't want your spot to get cold. Yeah, sure thing. I practically bolted up the stairs, locking myself in our room. I slumped against the door, trying to steady my palpitating heart. What was going on? Was it just me, or was that some seriously freaky behavior? Either way, I needed a second to calm down. I had my eyes shut, focusing on my breathing, when I heard it. My phone was buzzing from inside my pocket. I hurriedly retrieved it, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. I normally don't answer calls from strangers, but something compelled me. Maybe it was intuition, or perhaps I just wanted someone to talk to other than my husband. In the end, I accepted the call. Hello? Lydia? Lydia Atkins? Speaking. Look, this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to hear what I have to say. Okay? I suddenly jolted up from my spot on the floor and stared at the locked door separating me from the hallway. Loud knocks rattled in its frame. Lydia? Lydia, who are you speaking to? Panic surged through me as I scrambled for an answer. It's my mom. Go back downstairs. I'll be there in a minute. That was him, wasn't it? The caller said. That was my husband, yes. Why do you ask? I whispered, putting as much distance between myself and the door as possible. Lydia, I need you to hear me out. Can you promise me that you will? The pounding on the opposite side of the room grew even louder. Lydia, don't listen to her. She's a liar. My stomach began to twist itself into knots. How did he know? I'm listening. I'll hear what you have to say. The woman on the other end of the line breathed an audible sigh of relief. Okay. My name is Adeline, and Justin and I have been seeing each other for about 9 months. That man in your house is not your husband. My blood turned to ice, and I began to tremble. No, that couldn't be true. In a shaky voice, I asked the question that will haunt me until I die. How do I know you're telling the truth? There was a long pause, the bangs outside my door reaching a nauseating crescendo. When Adeline answered, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was in serious danger. Lydia, for the past week, Justin has been living with me. Adeline, if that's not my husband, then who is it? I tried to be calm, to think rationally, but Adeline must have picked up on the fear in my tone. Look, I don't know, but try to get out of the house if you can. I'm going to give you my address and I'll explain everything in person. I have to go. I'm sorry. The line went dead. All the while, the hammering continued to escalate. Lydia, unlock this door. I swear if I have to break this damned thing down, I will. Those words sent chills down my spine. Justin had only raised his voice at me a handful of times in the decade that I'd known him, and none of them were as threatening as that. I stood there, momentarily stunned, but a hard kick from the other side of the door was all I needed to spur me to move. I snatched my keys from the bedside table and raced to the window overlooking the front lawn. I hurriedly unlocked it and began to pull. Come on, you piece of shit, open, I muttered, a massive surge of adrenaline aiding my efforts. With one final heave, the window gave way, and not a moment too soon. The door began to splinter and crack. A few more hearty blows, and it was done for. I didn't have any time to waste. I punched out the screen, watching it tumble onto the shingles below. I took a deep breath before hoisting myself onto the roof. I had one leg out the window when it happened. Whoever or whatever was pretending to be my husband finally managed to get inside. My eyes grew wide as he charged over me. Lydia, don't do this. I can explain. I didn't want to hear what he had to say. Maybe that was stupid of me. Maybe I should have stayed and talked things out. But in that moment, Adeline's words kept surfacing to the forefront of my mind. Now I can only pray that I made the right choice. I pulled myself the remainder of the way out and slid down the roof, desperate to escape my pursuer. I yelped as I felt fingernails graze my arm. My heart jackhammered in my chest as I fell onto the grass. I scrambled to my feet, somehow unscathed aside from a few minor scratches, and bolted to my car. I flung open the door, threw myself inside, and jammed the keys into the ignition. Before I peeled out of the driveway, I briefly glanced up. Justin's lookalike was standing in the window, glowering at me. A devastating sense of dread consumed me as our eyes locked. That's what terrified me the most. His eyes. They were burning with rage, but something about them felt wrong. In fact, his entire face looked off, like he was trying to express an intense emotion, but he didn't quite know how. That instantly destroyed any qualms I had about leaving. I slammed the car into reverse and floored it. I briefly looked back as I sped away, and my stomach twisted itself into knots when I did. The window was empty. I was a wreck the whole way to Adeline's. An overwhelming flood of confusion, resentment, and fear swirled within me as the realization sank in. Justin really had cheated on me. And on top of that, he was leaving me for his mistress? It was all too much to process. I flew down the empty streets, tears trickling down my face. How did this happen? Why me? Why couldn't I have normal marital problems, like leaving the milk out or arguing over whose turn it is to do the dishes? I didn't ask for any of this. It wasn't fair. Fortunately, I didn't have much time to think about it. Thanks to my erratic driving, I made it to Adeline's place, if you could even call it that, in 10 minutes flat. I quickly parked beside the curb and stepped out. I gazed in bewilderment at the run-down shack as I made my way to the door. The house was tiny compared to ours. Faded, yellow paint peeled off the exterior, the shutters clung on for dear life, and empty beer bottles littered the front lawn. I'd be lying if I said it didn't give me a glint of satisfaction. I took a deep breath as I approached the door. Was I really going through with this? How did I know that Adeline was even telling the truth? Maybe I shouldn't have come. Before I had a chance to mull over any of those thoughts, the door swung open. A young woman, at least 5 years younger than me, stood in the doorway. As much as it pains me to admit it, she was beautiful. Long blonde hair flowed down to her waist and ocean blue eyes stared into mine. She was a stark contrast to me in every way. Lydia, come in. I slapped Adeline hard across the face, leaving an angry red imprint on her cheek. Sorry, knee-jerk reaction. She nodded, staring down at her feet. No, I deserved that. Come in, we've got a lot to talk about. I obliged, following her lead. Inside of the home wasn't much better than the outside. Empty takeout containers were strewn about the floor, the carpet was stained with God knows what, and the whole place smelled like cigarette smoke. It took everything in me not to throw up. Adeline rushed to the couch, brushing away some stale potato chips from one of the cushions. Sorry about the mess. You can have a seat if you want. One glance at that food-crusted sofa, and I instantly knew my answer. Thanks, but I think I'll stand. If you say so, Adeline shrugged, claiming the spot for herself. I guess I've got some explaining to do, huh? You sure do. Adeline again shifted her gaze to the floor before meeting my stare. Look, I'm really sorry about Justin. I'm not going to sit here and try to make up some half-assed excuse. I'm a terrible person. I folded my arms across my chest. You're not wrong. Is he here right now? You're at fault too, but Justin's the one I'm really pissed at. No, he's at the bar. He said he had some drinking to do. Lydia, I really am sorry. I know I can't make it up to you, but I held up my hand to stop her. As much as I'd love to berate you and listen to you suck up to me the whole night, that's not why I came. I've got bigger problems to worry about. How did you know about whatever took Justin's place? Adeline bit her lip, twirling a few strands of hair between her fingers. So, tonight I went with Justin to get some of his things from y'all's house. He said you usually took a bath around that time, so he was just going to go in and get it and get out before you noticed. But that thing, whatever it is, it met him at the door before he could go inside. I saw them arguing, then Justin walked back to the truck, pale as a ghost. He dropped me back off here without a single word. After I saw that, I knew I had to warn you. I made Justin give me your number and I called you right when I got home. I nodded, soaking in her revelation. That makes sense. I was wondering how you got my info, but I still have so many questions. What is this thing, and how did it manage to replace my husband? I mean, it's even got the same truck as he does. How is that possible? Adeline pursed her lips. I don't know. I wish I had more answers for you, but Lydia, you have to listen to me. Whatever we're dealing with, I don't think it has good intentions. Watch this. It'll prove that I'm telling the truth, she said, pulling up a video on her phone. I leaned in to get a better look. The video was of Justin. He was standing on our front porch, talking to himself. I could tell right away that the one facing the camera was the fake. It was too perfect. All its features were too smooth. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed it before. The longer I watched, the more uneasy I felt. As the conversation progressed, I could tell that the real Justin was getting heated. There was no audio, but I could see him getting visibly more angry, even with his back turned, until it happened. Imposter's face began to twist and contort in unnatural ways. It was as if someone was molding clay with an invisible hand, and that's where the video ended. The sight of it disturbed me on a primal level. My stomach churned and my head began to spin. I seriously thought I was going to be sick. That's why I had to tell you. I couldn't just sit by and let that monster hurt you. A loud pounding against the door cut Adeline off. Lydia, are you in there? I just want to talk. Adeline and I shared a terrified glance. This couldn't be happening. How would he track me down? Follow me. I'll take you out back. You parked on the street, right? Adeline whispered, leaping from the couch. Yeah, but how do I get around him? Won't he catch me if I make a break for it? Adeline met my gaze, a fiery determination gleaming in her eyes. I'll distract him. It's the least I can do. Good luck, she said, ushering me outside. The door clicked shut before I had a chance to thank her. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and without giving myself time to freak out, I raced to my car. I squeezed my keys with a vice grip as I ran, the world around me devolving into a blur of colors. I didn't even spare a glance at the front porch as I flew past. I was too focused on making it off that property alive. I was mere inches from the safety of my car. I was so close, but then I heard it. Lydia, why are you running? Come on, don't be like this. I fumbled with the keys and scrambled to hop into my car. Justin 2.0 sprinted toward me at an inhuman speed. Behind him, the door to the house was hanging wide open, and Adeline was nowhere to be found. I hurriedly turned my attention back to the steering wheel. I slammed on the gas, my tires squealing as I sped away. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my heart nearly stopped. The false Justin was standing beneath a street lamp. I don't know if it was my nerves or maybe the poor lighting. but I could have sworn that when I looked back, he was smiling, and for a moment, I was sure that I saw blood dribbling down his chin. I hyperventilated, tears flooding down my cheeks as I sped away. Once I was satisfied with the amount of distance I'd put between myself and Justin's doppelganger, I rolled into a gas station and parked at one of the pumps. I felt so lost, so confused. What the hell had just happened? Why did this thing want to track me down so badly? And Adeline, what had he done to her? I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to that question. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my palpitating heart. It's going to be okay, just calm down and come up with a plan. It'll all be over soon, I muttered, staring reassuringly at myself in the rearview mirror. I didn't truly believe that, but I had to do something. I couldn't afford to keep crying my eyes out and waiting there like a sitting duck. I needed a plan, so I did the only thing I could think to do. I hopped out of my car and prepared for gas. My head was on a swivel as I inserted the nozzle of the tank. The gas station was desolate, save for an older gentleman smoking a cigarette by the front door. My foot tapped against the concrete as the fuel gauge slowly ticked up. My heart pounded like a jackhammer the entire time, just waiting to see that familiar red truck pulling in beside me, but it never did. I breathed a sigh of relief, placing the pump back into its compartment. I glanced back at the man by the door for a split second before jumping back into the driver's seat. He was talking on the phone now. And was he grinning at me? I didn't want to wait to figure out what he was planning. I zipped down the road and onto the interstate. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed to get far away from my husband's look-alike. Once I was on the open road and all the fear had begun to dissipate, it hit me. Everything. The cheating, the lies, the betrayal, all of it, it all crashed down on me like a tidal wave. What hurt the most was the false sense of security I was lulled into. I'd let myself believe that Justin had changed, that he'd turned a new leaf with no provocation whatsoever. The thought that all that time, none of the love I'd been given was even real, it shattered my heart all over again. I'm not ashamed to admit that I cried. I sobbed uncontrollably as I continued down sparsely populated roads. I didn't want to be on the run from some unknown entity. I wanted to go back home and take a nice warm bath. But I knew I couldn't do that. I had been driving for a little over 3.5 hours before I started to get low on fuel again. I pulled off on the nearest exit. By that point, the adrenaline had worn off, and I was starting to get tired. I soon found myself at a rundown Motel 6 in the middle of nowhere. The red and blue sign flickered as I pulled into the parking lot, a great indicator of the quality of the room I would be staying in. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the mirror. "Come on, Lydia, you can do this," I murmured, stepping out of the car. My eyes darted from left to right as I made my way to check in. My BMW looked so out of place beside all the rusted clunkers sprinkled throughout the lot. I picked up my pace, my heart rate spiking. A bell chimed as I opened the door to retrieve my key. A young man with black greasy hair sat behind the counter reading a Playboy magazine. He didn't even look up as I approached. Hi, can I get a room?" The boy lazily glanced up at me before releasing a sigh. "Sure, $50. I pursed my lips as I fished through my wallet. $50 a night for this dump? What a ripoff. I slapped the cash onto the counter, thanking my lucky stars that I wouldn't have to risk getting my bank information stolen from their card reader. The boy, whose name tag read Steven, handed me the key for room 12 before pocketing the cash. "Thanks," I said, shooting him a glare as I snatched the keys. He gave me a slight nod before returning to his magazine. I nearly sprinted to room 12. I hurriedly slammed the keys into the lock before shoving the door open. Right as I was closing it, something caught my eye. Headlights. I kept the door cracked just enough to see. Silly, right? Surely I was just being paranoid. There was no way that it was him. Justin's truck cruised into the parking lot. It was unmistakable. The faded red paint, the dent on the driver's side door, the crack running down the entirety of the windshield. It was all there. I quietly locked myself in the room, my head spinning. How was this happening? I was so far from home. How had he found me again? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. How stupid could I possibly be? The answer was so simple. I pulled out my phone, and there it was. Justin and I were sharing our locations. With everything that had happened, I hadn't even thought to turn it off. I knew it was too late, but I turned off location services anyway. I felt nauseous as I placed my phone back in my pocket. How accurate was that thing? Did the doppelganger know what room I was in? Morbid curiosity got the best of me. I had to know. With a shaky hand, I brushed back the blinds to my window. The second I did, tears began to trickle down my cheeks, and my blood turned to ice. He was outside. Justin's impersonator was standing directly outside my window. His eyes were wide and manic. The grin he wore looked off, like it was too big for his face. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. The fake Justin walked up to the glass and paused for just a moment. The silence was so deafening that the only audible noises was the blood pumping in my ears. And then he moved. His tongue lolled out of his mouth, and he slapped it against the glass with a wet thump. He dragged it upward, those inhuman eyes never breaking contact with mine. I found you. It's time to stop running and let me in. His smile vanished as he gritted out those words. That was enough to snap me from my stupor. I let the blinds fall over the window and stumbled backward, nearly crashing into a table. That's where I am now, writing this at that table. I'm done for. It's only a matter of time before he breaks in. I phoned the front desk, but no one answered. I called the police too, but response times are slow this far out in the boonies. This will most likely be my final update. If the cops don't show up on time, I don't know what he'll do to me. My hands are trembling as I type this. He's trying to kick the door down, and I don't think it's going to hold. To anyone reading this, please listen to me. If you notice a sudden change in a loved one's personality, don't brush it off, because it just might be this thing wearing their face.